Hello horror hounds, welcome back to my A to Z of horror. We're already at S, and a film that has spent so long unwatched on my shelves over there that I completely forgot that I bought it and thought that it was the stuff that I bought. But no, it's 1987 body melt black horror comedy, Street Trash. With the introductions out of the way, here's where I traditionally draw a halt to the momentum I've built up and point you towards a completely different YouTube channel, Jambo Shango and Randy Mole's excellent channel, and their own A to Z of horror which inspired this. In the description field below, I will provide a link to their entry for S and their review of Slither. But for now, let's get trashy. I've read a ton of reviews that liken this, understandably, to Peter Jackson's early work, Bad Taste and Brain Damage, Dead Alive as it's known in the US, and I can understand it, a sort of mixture of outrageous comedy and really over-the-top gore effects. But honestly, whilst I was watching this for the first time, it had more of a Clark's vibe to it. The sort of semi-professional acting in it, to be kind, and semi-improvised nature of it did feel a lot like sort of the freewheeling, hey, let's just put on the show right here feel of Clark's, only with melting bodies and much, much more. It's offensive on an almost industrial scale. Murder, gang rape, necrophilia, racial slurs, post-Vietnam PTSD played for laughs, police brutality played for laughs, comedy homeless people, and yet it all plays into some kind of hyper-real, cartoony feeling. The owner of a Brooklyn liquor store finds a cheap case of wine hidden in his cellar basement and decides to sell it to the local hobos for $1 a bottle. Unfortunately, anyone who drinks a bottle of Viper, even just a mouthful, melts away instantly and hideously. We loosely follow the story of a couple of homeless brothers who live in a junkyard trying to avoid a psychotic Vietnam vet called Bronson, who leads a small gang of homeless people in another area of the junkyard as if it were his kingdom. He even has a throne made of trash. Throw in an overzealous cop hell-bent on busting Bronson, who he believes is responsible for a number of bodies showing up, and a low-level mob boss and his mouthy restaurant doorman, and a game of catch with a man's penis that ends with the newly castrated tramp hitching a ride to hospital, clinging his severed member and the back of a bus full of screaming school children, and that pretty much sums up the kind of slapdash, chaotic mayhem that Street Trash inhabits. It's quite amusing to read the online reviews from people who, on an intellectual level, realise that they should probably be outraged by this movie and are trying to justify the fact that they love it by twisting some kind of subtext into the film, a howl from the disenfranchised against Reaganomics. Let me read you a couple of excerpts. It's a 1980s American film like Repo Man that celebrates the proletariat's resigned disenfranchisement as a badge of aesthetic honour. And when we see that suited businessman having his face burnt off by the dripping debris of a melting pauper, we are also witness to a visceral riposte to the Reaganite principles of trickle-down economics. Let's be honest, Street Trash addresses these issues in the same way that in its dying moments Roger Corman's Death Race 2000 purports to be a treatise on modern day violence. If reading a whole lot of political subtext into Street Trash helps you like the movie or helps you come to terms with the fact that you like the movie, that's absolutely fine. Heaven knows you can go back through any number of my old reviews and I'll be trying to squeeze subtext in where most people are going, geez, let it go, dude, it's about people's heads being cut off. With Street Trash, I just decided to let all of that go, let the film wash over me, and that sort of let bygones be bygones attitude is probably a great way to enjoy Street Trash. Don't overthink it. It goes out of its way to try and offend and insult everyone and everything, to be as outrageous as it's at all possible to be. Sometimes, to my sensibilities, yes, it does go too far. But the joie de vivre that it sets about its task of pissing off everyone and just ploughing its own furrow is to be commended. From everything I've said here, if you haven't seen the film, you should be getting the image of something very, very amateurish. And on one level, it kind of is amateurish. It is a kind of, hey, let's put on the show here vibe. But that underlies the fact that there's an enormous amount of skill beneath the slapdash, seeming slapdash approach. The frames are amazingly set up. The colours ridiculously vivid. The quasi cartoonish sort of heightened reality. This is not a grungy documentary chanting the grindingly depressing life of the homeless on the streets of Brooklyn. It's a live action cartoon. It opens with a masterful tracking shot down at street level through the rubbish, the trash, into a prolonged chase scene. Director Jim Monroe's debut film, his only feature, I think, but his exceptional Steadicam work, an eye for a shot and camera movement would see him subsequently. He's basically the top Steadicam guy in Hollywood, employed by Oliver Stone, Brian De Palma, James Cameron, Martin Scorsese, Michael Mann. Jim Monroe must be doing something right. It's just a real shame he never got back into the director's chair. There's real technical ability behind what's trying to be a sort of Animal Housey to the establishment and everyone. The feature is based on a 10-minute short film, which is also included on the disc. If you do want to level some negative criticism at the film, you could ask yourself whether it struggles to fill a feature length from its short film origins. If you don't dig street trash, what it gives the viewer is a few ill-connected storylines featuring poorly behaving people who do bad things aimlessly for laughs, hoping that the audience might find them funny. And I'll admit, as I mentioned earlier, there are times when it goes a little too far. A zombie-like horde of the homeless dragging a woman off and gang raping her as a punchline to a scene is too much for me, and the film almost lost me at that point. As was the junkyard owner's attempted rape of one of his employees, and then his subsequently finding the body of the raped and murdered woman. And by that point, as he approaches the body, I'm saying out loud, oh, no way, surely he's not going to. And so, by the time this truly repulsive character finds out from the cops that semen samples taken from the raped and murdered woman show that one of her rapists had herpes, that he realizes he's now contracted by having sex with her body. I was hooting with laughter again. I'm sorry. Saying it like this makes me sound like the most awful person in the world when you watch it in the context of the film. I guess by that point, if you're going with the film, you might as well just go out. And that street trash, I guess, it bashes you over the head and you'll either relent and join the party or switch it off in disgust. I had an idea that there would be more body melting and less skits, but once I twigged to the pace and vibe of the piece, I found myself chuckling and then laughing out loud. I'm very eager to return to it again, knowing what kind of a story and what kind of pacing it does have, so I can sort of enjoy it right out the traps from the get-go. Oh, and it's got a funnier shoplifting scene than the video for Jane's addictions being caught stealing, and it has the best animal reaction shots in a movie ever. Yes, even better than the double-taking pigeon from Moonraker. Whilst the look of the nominal protagonist was such that I spent the movie in my own head playing it through as though it were the further adventures of the lead singer of the Spin Doctors, one for the teenagers, final word has to go to the mouthy doorman played by James Lawrence, stealing every scene he's in, practically stealing the entire movie, ad-libbing like a trooper. And basically I just think Munro realised, if I put the camera on this guy and let him go, it's golden. Him finding himself in trouble with his gangster boss, and the 3 scenes he's in outside the restaurant, at the police station, and then later on the very final scene, the coda of the movie, which just frankly sealed it as an all-time favourite of mine. The fate of the mafia boss. And then, if you guys have seen Team America, do you remember when Kim Jong-un reveals himself to be a cockroach alien, crawls into a spacecraft and flies off, and over the end credits you get a song from him about how much he hates Alec Baldwin and his flight back to his home planet? Well, at the end of Street Trash, after the mafia boss meets his comeuppance, you then, over the end credits, get a song from him about the scene that you've just seen. It's amazing. Do you know what? I might put it on again tonight. I don't know why it's taken me so long to catch up to the insane glory that is Street Trash. I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad it wasn't The Stuff that I bought. Nothing against The Stuff, I haven't seen that either. But now I've seen Street Trash. And I can't believe it just exists on its own in a little 1987 time capsule. I can't believe that Jim Munro didn't make more feature films as a director. My takeaway from watching this gloriously over the top, insanely offensive film is that if we can get 3 seasons of Ash versus Evil Dead, we can get Street Trash the series. Make it happen. So that was S. We move on to T, traditionally. I'm not one to buck the alphabet, so we'll stick to the normal MO, S to T. And a film that, it's a little gem that I only recently discovered, bought it on a whim, watched it because it's one of the few T's I've got, and loved it. It's a little curiosity that sits chronologically midway between the gothic horror of the Hammer movies and the slasher craze of the 80s to come. Please join me next time when I reveal that T is for